Local watering hole can sometimes be tricky if you don't have the proper identification when they ask you for ID. The process known as carding, right? You don't look your age or perhaps the age that is legally allowed to have booze served to them. Well, if you don't have that identification, being turned away shouldn't be a big deal. But in one Halifax town, one Halifax pub, it seems to be a bit of an issue. Paige McPherson, you've been to this place that we're talking about. Yeah,
the Ale House, the Halifax Ale House. It really is one of the classic bars in Halifax. It actually has something called a cabaret license, wherein they're one of the only bars that are able to stay open until 3:30 in the morning, where most of the bars have to shut down earlier. And that's important to know only because that's one of the reasons why they really wanted to be strict on this, as strict as the law tells them to be, so as to not lose their license.
Okay, so this guy goes in, he sits down, he orders a beverage, and they say to him what?
Well, this guy goes in, so a little bit of context. He was an immigrant from Sierra Leone. His name is Gilpin, and Dino Gilpin, and he's 32 years old. He walks into the Halifax Ale House, gets in, asks for a beer at the bar, and the bartender asks him for ID. So sometimes, I guess, if there's not a security guard at the door, then you would go up to the bar and be ID'd there. He gave a few pieces of identification: an expired Nova Scotia identification card, which is basically what you get when you don't have a driver's license, expired driver's license, a picture-free and Nova Scotia health card, and his Canadian citizen card that had a photo on it. But unfortunately, none of those are legally accepted as ID in Nova Scotia.
Well, because many of them are expired, first of all.
Yeah, exactly. So they need to be valid. The things that are accepted in Nova Scotia are the valid provincial ID, the valid driver's license, or your passport, which also obviously can't be expired. So none of those things fit the bill, so the bartender asked him to leave. At that point, he refused to leave. So the manager came over and said, "Sorry, sir, you really have to leave," whatever. He started making a scene, and at that point, the management of the bar decided to call the cops to try and escort him out of the bar. And that has now prompted him to go to the Human Rights Commission, where he actually has won the case. The Human Rights Commission has ruled in his favor.
This is the wild part about it, because they were saying basically it wasn't necessarily the carding practice, asking for identification. It was the actual practice of calling the police after he raised his stink about it and refused to leave the establishment. The people who actually made this ruling, put it together, the guy who chaired the whole thing, quoted Maya Angelou.
I know, you can't make this stuff up.
It's
quoting
unreal.
Maya Angelou. He said, so as Maya Angelou said, this is from the actual ruling: "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Mr. Gilpin wept as he told the story, and he will never forget how the Halifax Ale House made him feel. But they were just doing their job.
Well, of course they were doing their jobs, and this is the reason I can't stand human rights commissions. And people think that makes me insincere and heartless. To the contrary, I think that we diminish actual human rights complaints when we start to put these rather trivial ones on the docket, and then they end up winning the case. I mean, no bar in the world should have to break laws in order to cater to people's feelings, because that's basically what was asked of this bar.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So now he has won this complaint, and of course the Human Rights Commission ruled that it was actually racist of the bar to have called the police in to invoke the force of the state. That was in the ruling, to usher him out of the bar. And eventually the police actually charged him with public drunkenness, detained him for a night, put him in custody, what's called the drunk tank, when I was in Halifax, and they dismissed the charge. That's a very common thing that happens when you are under the influence in Halifax. A little bit of context: I mean, I did live there for a long time.
Never in the drunk tank.
Never was in the drunk tank, but I was turned away from the Ale House actually because I had an expired driver's license while I was in Nova Scotia for a while there, and so it's not like, I'm not black, obviously, so I mean that's not the only type of people that they turn away. But this is a pretty common occurrence. It is a university town within Halifax, where there's about 370,000 people. There are 6 universities and colleges inside of that very small city. So I mean, it is filled with underage students, and all of the bars, as a result, are very strict. And there actually are other bars in Halifax that have been shut down for not properly IDing. For our viewers at home from Nova Scotia, they might remember the Pogue Fido actually got shut down for that reason, a very popular bar just like the Ale House. And as I mentioned at the start, the Ale House having this special kind of license, they were kind of grandfathered into the system. They're particularly strict on this. So I mean, the absurdity of it all, when you understand the context, is crazy.
Well, what would happen if you had gone to the Human Rights Commission? I wish we had the ability to go back in time just to run the exercise, not because I actually like the idea of you complaining, but what would happen if a white woman who goes into this pub and doesn't have her ID handy, has an expired driver's license just as you did, decides, okay, well now you're doing this because of my race. I mean, the people that could be escorting you out could be white as well. It would be insignificant. It wouldn't matter because this is not an issue of race. I could understand if the gentleman was called names, if there was some sort of bigotry. I might not suggest going to a human rights commission, but looking into the ownership, but none of those things happened.
No, not at all. It was just a very typical situation. This is a situation, I went to university in Halifax, this happens all the time. You go to the bar, you don't have ID, you get ushered out, and if you won't leave and you make a kind of scene, they're probably going to call the police, and if you happen to be determined by the police to be drunk in public, you're going to be sent to the drunk tank. They're not going to charge you, they are going to dismiss the charge and let you out in the morning, which is exactly what happened in this case. Yeah, and I mean, there is, of course, that double standard. I don't know what would have prompted him to go to the Human Rights Commission about this. And the funny thing is, you know, he also contests the fact that he was drunk in public. He says that he wasn't, and there were some staff at the bar who actually said that he didn't seem drunk. But he didn't even go to the Human Rights Commission over the police. He first went about the bar, and he said he's going to, you know, challenge the police now. But I mean, he targeted the bar here, and the kind of ramifications that we're probably going to see from that, what you know, they're waiting. Basically, the Ale House is waiting to see what the ruling will determine what their punishment is, but the result could be that all restaurant and bar staff in Nova Scotia could have to go through training to talk about racial profiling.
I'm going to have